So today is lesson 10, and we're going to resume. Our security implementation in our PHP Flicks. So I've already got my software up and running for today. So make sure that you do that. If you haven't already, connected to the VPN and started up your XAMPP server. And then I just opened up Visual Studio Code. So we're going to pick up where we left off last week, but we are going to backtrack just a little bit because as Hamid and Sarah pointed out, there was a little logic flaw in the code we added to validate logins at the end of class last week. We got very confused emails from Hamid and Sarah saying, I don't understand why this isn't working. I did it the way you did it, and even when I put in an invalid login, I get directed off to the movies page. And the reason is because there's a problem with the code I gave you in class, which we will clean up for starters. So here was where we left off last week. We downloaded the register and login pages that I had uploaded to Blackboard. We created our users table in the database, and we talked about hashing passwords, transforming a plain text readable string into a random string of characters that could not be reconverted back to plain text. We built this login screen. And I'll just open up our validate.php because this is the page we want to start with. So just a quick review of how our login validation script works. We capture the username and password. We connect to our database. First, we query the database based on the username only. So do we have the username? And we said, if we don't have a user with this username, we wanted to return to the login screen and show an invalid message on the top. And then if we had found that username, we were going to use the password verify method that comes built into PHP. It would hash the password and then compare it to the password we found in the database. And if those passwords didn't match, again, we wanted to take the user back to the login page with a message. And then our last scenario was the username was found and the password, when we hashed it, it matched what was in the database. We wanted to access the session object, store their username, and then take them to the movies page. So this was all the code. It's all on GitHub. You probably grabbed it. And as Sarah and Hamid pointed out, we have an issue with it. So close this up and reconnect and see what's going on. So I'm just going to look at the users table for a moment. Okay, so I have 3 users in my database. We all created a user called test@test.com. I created a couple other users in my afternoon class. And then we've got these 60-character password hashes. So what Sarah and Hamid pointed out is even if they used a different login, we were never getting sent back to the login page with an invalid message. So I'll try this here. I'll go to login. I'll put in someone. So this username, this login doesn't exist in my database. So the result here when I click the login button is this page should reload, and our gray message here, this gray banner should turn red, and there should be a message that says invalid login. Yet when I try it, it logs me in. How do I know? Well, because it directed me off to the movies page. So there's a little flaw in the logic of our validate page that we want to fix up before we carry on. The problem is, even after we call header location, the rest of our code still executes. The header doesn't redirect the file until all the code below runs. So there's a couple ways we can deal with this. For me, the easiest way to deal with this is simply to wrap these other conditions, thank you, Hamid, in else clauses. So I'm going to do this. I'm just going to indent my second two if statements. So this is what happens if the username is not found, right? We don't care about checking the password at this point. If the username isn't found, we just want to redirect. So after this first if clause, I'm going to put in an else. So I've added else. You can see line 21 and line 36, that's my new else clause. So if the user is found, then we are going to go inside of this code block. I'm then going to add an else condition around this code block as well. And this should fix up our logic flow errors. So the first scenario up here, we don't find the username. So we're just going to redirect. And then none of this code, because it's in an else, none of this code will happen. We need to do the same thing within this block now. So this block means we have a username. So next we're going to try the password. And if the password is wrong, again, we want to go to login and we don't want to do anything else. So this last block of code here, I'm going to indent one more time. And I'm going to wrap it in an else clause as well. So this should prevent this problem of our PHP script continuing to execute even after we've called header location. Because now we have three separate scenarios and they're all divided with if and else. So only one of these conditions can possibly execute. If this executes, then neither of these will. So we will try this out, but this should fix the logic flow where our users were going off to the movies page, even if their username or password were incorrect. So I'm going to try out all three of the scenarios. First, I'm going to try a username that I know doesn't exist. Then I'm going to try a username that we have in the database, test@test.com, but I'll use a password I know is wrong. And that should give us this scenario. And then when I put in a valid username and password, I should go to the movies page in that case. Okay, so we've added this else and this one, along with the matching closing braces at the bottom. This should fix our challenge, and thanks to Sarah and Hamid for pointing it out. So I'm going to go back. First, I'm going to try an invalid username. So for you, you can put in any email that isn't test@test.com. And now I get this yellow error saying invalid login. So that was the first scenario, an email that doesn't exist in the database. The next scenario is where the email address is valid, but the password isn't. So maybe I just put, we know the password is test1234. So this should also return me to this same page And again, I should have the yellow error at the top. So when I submit, same thing. And then I try my final scenario. Again, I'll put the login in the chat in case you forgot it from last week. Our username is test@test.com, and our password is going to be test1234 with a capital T. And now when I log in, I get to the movies page. So the algorithm's correct now. Our logic flow is right. So we just added those two else clauses to ensure that only one of those conditions can be true and only one of these code blocks will execute. Yes, okay, Belinda, we will get to that. Right now, there is still no security, right? So that's our next step, is to control access. So we will change our site. That's what we're going to do next. We're going to do a couple of things. We're going to make it so an anonymous user, they can see this page, but they won't see any of the links, and they won't have access to the movie details or delete pages. So they will get a read-only version of this. Well, Hamid, you could, but from a logic perspective, it doesn't really make sense to me. Oh, I see. Could you put this? Well, no, it will fail because if there is no user object, then this is going to be null. So we should be checking for the user first because we're passing in a null. So that's why we're checking them separately with password verify. There's no point checking the password if the username doesn't exist. Right? If we don't have that object, then this is a pointless check because that will be null. So what we want to do now, Belinda, that's exactly what we're going to do, is we're first going to restrict access to movie details. The link in the nav bar can stay, but a user cannot get to this page if they're not logged in. So what we're going to do is create a little include file, an authentication check, that will tell us whether the user's logged in or not, and then we'll run that authentication check on our movie details page. So just before, but actually we're going to do that in a minute. There's something else we want to do before we do that. We want to change our navigation bar. Yes, we do need to build a logout, and then we also want to toggle these links. So as soon as someone logs in, we can see their username and log out. So that's going to be a visual cue whether we're logged in or not. So we're going to actually do that first. So first, let's open up our header file. Inside our includes directory, we've got our header. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to move the register and login links. Right now they're in this UL. I'm going to create these in a separate list so that the register and login links, rather than appearing part of the main navigation, they're going to be over here. So I'm going to break up, we've got this UL tag here. I'm going to close it after my movies link. And then I'm going to add a new one. Again, I'm going to use the same classes, but then I'm going to use, I think it's MS Auto. and then I'm going to delete the closing UL. So there's now two different unordered lists in our nav bar. So the first one is our main site links, and then these are our separate, it's our separate link section for authentication. So this will justify the register and login links. Okay, so it moves them over here. So now we're going to write an if statement in here. I'm going to indent my register and login links. And above that, inside my UL, I'm going to open a PHP tag. And in here, we're going to call session start. So we will access the current session. And what we want to find out is if the user is logged in or not. We'll say if empty, session username. And I'm just going to open a curly bracket. So if the user is not logged in, we want to show these links. And then I'm going to open another set of PHP tags. With an else. So show register and log in when our user is anonymous. There is no username session variable. And then we'll put in two links if they are logged in. The first one is just a dead link. Actually, you know what? I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to do this a little differently. It'll be a little easier if I just use an echo statement. I think I'll just do it this way. There. I'll do it like that, rather than opening and closing PHP tag continuously. Sorry, I'll rewrite it. So if our user is anonymous, we will print out register and login links. Otherwise, I'll grab this same echo statement and copy it, and then we'll make some changes to it. If the user is logged in, we're going to print here their username. So where the register link had appeared, once someone logs in, we're going to show their email address in the navigation bar instead. And our login link is instead going to be changed to say logout, and it'll go to a page we're going to build next called logout.php. So this code is going to change the contents of the right side of our navigation bar depending on whether a user is logged in or anonymous. A logged in user sees their username and log out, and an anonymous user sees register and log in. I'm going to save this and try it, see if we need to change it or if there's any errors. So you can see right now it's actually working because it shows that shows my username on every page because I just logged in my Firefox browser. I'll try this in Chrome. So in Chrome, where I'm not logged in, notice every page I go to says register and log in. We're changing the links in our nav bar. So in Chrome, I'm anonymous, so my links on all pages say register and log in. In Firefox, I'm already logged in, so the register and login links disappear, and I see my username and logout instead. So we've added this section. I've moved the register and login links that we had in our original navbar. I've moved them inside a separate UL that's off on the right. And we've added this if statement that will show two of the links and hide the other two. And then the next thing we'll need to do is, to make this a little easier to work with, is we need to build a logout page. And we'll see when we click logout that our username and logout links will disappear from the navigation, and the register and login links will reappear. I'm just going to leave it, Tyler, for now. You could, as an extra challenge, if you wanted to make a user profile page where you could change your password, you can do that. I don't think we will have time. I just made it a link so that it styles that way. You don't have to make it an anchor if you don't want, but the style also will make it in that same color. So it'll be a little easier to see now. Look, we're going to build a simple logout page. And that's going to make this toggling of these navbar elements a little easier to see, because we can log in, log out, and we'll see how that process changes what gets displayed in this area of our navbar. So I'm going to just go back to the root folder. I don't want it in my includes. We're going to make a simple logout folder. So, a logout page. So let's create a file in our root folder called logout.php. This is an invisible page. Users never see it, so there's no actual HTML content here. We need to access the current session, which is weird, but needed to remove it. So we'll call session start. So session start, it doesn't really start a session, it's initializing the data. The session is started automatically on the server, but if we want to access the data, we need to call session start. Actually, we'll do one thing first. Data. We're going to clear the data. We're going to get rid of the session. And then we're going to redirect back the user back to the login page. So there's a few, we're just calling built-in methods here. We can call session unset. That removes, frees up any session variable. So right now we're only using one, which is their username. So it sets that to a null value. Then we just call my favorite method in PHP, very powerful, session destroy. And then lastly, we'll take the user back to the login page. There's not much else to log out. So in your assignment, you can use this page as it is. It's fine that your logout page is going to be exactly the same as mine. It's not plagiarism. This is really the simple way to do the file. Because you do need authentication in your assignment, regardless of which version you pick. But you can use this logout page as it is. I'm fine. It removes any session variable. It may not be strictly necessary, since session destroy, it says it destroys all the data registered to the session. I have found it to be a little unreliable sometimes in the past to call session destroy. So it's safer to make sure you remove any session variables first before deleting the object. Yeah. Okay, so now watch what happens. I'm still logged in, right? We can see I'm logged in, but once I click log out, my username and logout, those links disappear. So now I can tell that I'm logged out of the site. If I log in again, then again, we'll see my username and logout replace the register and login links that are here. So this is fairly typical behavior. We know that a lot of web applications give you this feature. I mean, Blackboard used to do it. The old version of Blackboard would show your username. And many sites, this is where we expect to see the logout. So now we can log in, we can log out, and our site has the proper visual indicators to tell us whether we're logged in or not. Now there are still no access controls, right? Even if I log out, I can still add or edit or delete. Okay, so you are probably missing a bracket. You've opened, when you get unexpected, that means something was not terminated. You opened something and didn't close it. So I'll leave this up for another minute. There you go. Unexpected always means something wasn't terminated. So now we want to go and implement our access control. So we will start on the movie details page. So this page now should be completely off limits to somebody who's not logged into the site. We don't even want to let them open the page. If they try to request this URL, they should get taken here. And because we're going to have some other pages, I will upload to GitHub at the break, so then if you need to catch up, code will be there. So we have several pages in our site. What other pages do you think should be restricted? We're definitely going to want to restrict the movie details page, right? This is our form for adding and editing. So what other files? Okay, yes, Sarah, we could add it to genres, yep. Well, actually, Hamid, validate has to be public, because remember, they're not authenticated yet. Validate is the page where we are authenticating somebody. So we can't require security here, otherwise no one would ever be able to log in, right? Because that session variable doesn't get set to the end of the page. So what other files do you see that we should restrict access to? If we want our site, okay, yeah, so the movie details, yeah, the delete. So you shouldn't be able, so delete movie needs an authentication check. And also our save movie needs an authentication check. So you cannot run an insert, an update, or a delete unless you're logged in. So I'm going to go into my includes, and I'm going to make a new file here called auth.php. So this is our authentication check. So any page where a user can change data in the database, other than the registration page, we're restricting access. Okay, actually, let me think here for a minute. So we're going to put it on our movie details page first. I'm just going to open that up for a second. And let's look at the structure. So we've got our header here. So we also are going to need to require our authentication check. Bear with me for 1 second. Thinking about our order here, how we want to do this. Yeah, I think we'll need to check. We can't call session start twice. Just want to think about the best way to do this. Check sessions. Okay, yeah, this is what I was looking for. I couldn't remember the syntax. Session status. We'll say if session status equals, I think it's PHP session none. So this would mean sessions are enabled, but there is no So if there is nothing in the session, no session exists, that means our user hasn't logged in. Right? If the session is empty, yeah, the session might exist, but that means they have not gone through, started the session, and created session variable with their username. We may change this. We're going to try it this way. It's a little different than the way I've done it before. So what we're going to do is we're going to now include this file as the very first line of our movie details right here. So this will be our auth check. So we're going to require and we're going to do this before we start on the header, because there's no point displaying the HTML in the header page if the user isn't allowed in here. So we want this to be our very first thing. And so here's our auth. So I'm going to try this out now. So make sure you log out. Right? When we can tell we're logged out, when we see register and log in. And then I'm going to go to my movies page, and now I'm going to try to add a new movie, right? Because this will link me. And my auth check bounces me over to log in instead. So I can no longer add a new movie as an anonymous user. Well, what about an edit? If I go and click on one of the movies, same thing, right? So we've now locked access to the movie details, because that's the page that will load when we add a movie or click on a movie title. And it should be the very first line. Yes, we haven't, it will work so far, Daniel, because we'll do that next. So delete is still going to work. Good question, right? I can go in here. So if I want to delete something, it still works because we haven't added that auth check to delete yet. Okay, Tyler, it's still, okay, we may have to change it. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to log in and try again. Okay. Right, so our check's not quite right. We'll modify this a little bit. I'm going to move this. So we'll call session start if we need to, and then we'll say we'll now check for our username variable in the session. We'll try it this way. Well, we never really checked. We want to be checking for this variable, right? Because anytime a user logs in, we're creating a session variable called username. First is just checking whether we need to call session start. Tyler, we can, but if that variable is empty, we don't really need to. It doesn't matter because there is no username in the session. Let's try it this way. Log out, log in. So now, okay, right. So we'll need this little check in the header as well. We get a warning here because we've called session start twice now. That's okay. We can fix that. So now when I'm logged in, I can add or edit. But when I'm logged out, I can't add or edit. So this is the right result. We just need to fix this one little error in our header. So I'm going to just add this same if statement around that session start in the header. So here on line 34, I'm going to wrap this one. The session status equals session none. So we only call session start that'll get rid of that little warning. Now I think we're good. So session start won't get called again on this page because it's already will have been called from our auth file. I'll just try it out again. So again, as an anonymous user, I cannot edit or add. Once I log in, I can go and add a movie or edit a movie, and that warning about my session variable is no longer. Yes, we are going to do that, Belinda. We're going to add logic on movies. It's always a good idea. If the user shouldn't be able to access those pages, they shouldn't even be able to see the links. We will do that next. Okay, I'm going to upload to GitHub now. It's 8:50. Let's take a 10-minute break here. I'm going to upload the code to GitHub, so if you need to get caught up on anything, you can. When we come back, we're going to add our authentication check to the save and delete pages for movies. Because Belinda, even without the links, they could still browse to those URLs directly, right? Even if without the link, somebody could type, they could like go to delete movie and hit enter, right? And then the link is going to run. So it's not enough to hide the links. We have to do both. We have to restrict access to those pages, and we should also hide the links and visual cues for users who don't see them. Just like in Blackboard, right? You don't see these little drop downs. Even if you were restricted from accessing the functions, you shouldn't even see the visual cues tell you that they're there. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording. Give me a moment to upload to GitHub, and we will take 10, and we'll come back and we'll keep working on this.